Hey sisters, the doors to our 4-week meal prep and workout course are officially open. We've designed this course based off of the gluten and dairy-free meals that we eat and the PCOS-friendly workouts that we do together, so you know they're delicious and fun. This course is exactly how I was able to lose 30 pounds with PCOS, and we've created step-by-step video tutorials to show you how to make the meals and do the workouts, so it's super easy to follow. Enroll today for lifetime access because doors close on Friday, May 15th. Welcome to A Cyster and Her Mister, a podcast where we show you the real behind the scenes of how we balance the PCOS lifestyle in our marriage, gluten and dairy free. I'm Tallene, your fellow sister and registered dietitian.
And I'm Sirak, husband, engineer, and PCOS personal trainer. We're going to make PCOS a little less overwhelming and a lot more fun. Welcome everybody to A Cyster and Her Mister. Today we have a special guest on, along with my wife Tallene. It is Dr. Samina.
Yay! Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Samina. She is a naturopathic doctor, and she has seen so many women with PCOS, and she's here to talk to us about PCOS and answer the questions from sisters on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Welcome, Dr. Samina. Do you want to give a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Samina. I'm from Ontario, that's in Canada. And so basically my specialty my special interest is working with patients who have PCOS. And this really stemmed from the fact that I was diagnosed with PCOS over 10 years ago now. And I was actually diagnosed by a naturopathic doctor because my family doctor didn't really know what was going on. And that was a huge point in my health care because I was able to really understand what was going on in my body in terms of hormones. And then really using like diet and lifestyle and supplementation, I was able to really manage and balance my hormones, which is why, that led me into the interest of really learning more and more about women's health and PCOS. And then really focusing my practice on helping these patients who have PCOS as well.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
It's interesting because it's very similar to how Tallene's journey was. She was diagnosed, and it's funny you were both diagnosed by a naturopathic doctor. And honestly, it seems like naturopathic doctors are a lot more helpful than like regular doctors when it comes to PCOS.
Once I switched to a naturopathic doctor, I got answers and solutions. But how long did it take you to figure things out for your body? Because every woman with PCOS is different. It takes time to figure out how to reverse things.
So for me, it was, I went on birth control. I remember it was for acne. And the birth control really messed up with my body and my hormones. I felt like I got depressed by being on it. So then I got off, and then the doctor put me on an antidepressant, because that's the natural thing to do, right? You're depressed, so you need an antidepressant. So I said, okay. And I was like, well, let me just see if this passes. And I waited 2 months and I was still feeling really bad. So then I came back and I was like, okay, yeah, I think I need the antidepressant. So I went on antidepressants at that point. And then I knew that something was off because now my cycles are irregular, like super irregular. Because even before the birth control, I wasn't necessarily keeping track of it, but I knew something was off. But at that point, like, I didn't really care about if my cycle was regular or not, right? Like, I was in my teens at that point. And then, that's when I went to a naturopathic doctor, and she was like, I think you have PCOS just based on what you're presenting with. I had like all the symptoms of high testosterone, like hirsutism and acne. And, I didn't have hair loss, but I had those two big ones. And I had irregular cycles. And so that prompted her to do an ultrasound, to like say, go to your medical doctor and get an ultrasound. Because naturopaths, we can't in Canada requisition ultrasounds. So then got an ultrasound, there was multiple follicles on my ovaries. So they were like, okay, like now you have 3 out of, the 3 that we look for in Rotterdam criteria. And so I think it's a matter of A, we have more time, B, we're really trained in hormone health. and hormones. And a family doctor's really is good at looking at hormones, but what they should be doing maybe is sending these patients to an endocrinologist, and maybe they can find out through the endocrinologist, because the endocrinologist will do a lot of similar testing that we will do to find out if you have PCOS. But yeah, I feel like it could be just time and the fact that we're very trained in hormones.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's a lot more people specialize in those areas, whereas maybe before it was more general practice and they weren't looking at those specific concepts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you have irregular cycles, we'll just put you on birth control to regulate it.
Yeah, like that used to be the thought that, oh, that'll fix everything and then
Yeah.
you'll be back on track, and then
Yeah, so then when you want kids, we'll just take you off the birth control and your cycle will be perfectly fine.
yeah.
But a lot of these a lot of these patients are not experiencing that, and that's the issue, right? And then they're coming and they're being like, why is this happening? Like, tell me why. So we have
Yeah.
we have the time to go over their
Yeah.
diet, to go over their lifestyle, to like figure out those things with them and really get them on a track that actually helps them long term, right?
There's a lot of skipping over the why when you go to a gynecologist. They don't have the time to like sit there usually and explain exactly why and what's going on and what you can do and all of these things.
Exactly. They just don't have enough time.
How long did it take you to reverse your symptoms?
Say if okay, so yeah, I went on birth control. Honestly, within that year after coming off of birth control, because I went to the
Oh,
naturopath and then got the ultrasound and then basically knew within that year that I had PCOS. So I was lucky. I
yeah,
found
you,
it at the age
yeah.
of 19. Like
That's good.
that's amazing, especially because that was like more than 10 years ago.
You like
Wow,
skipped over all the drama of
that's
like
good.
gaining 100 pounds and like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
That's
it was
great.
huge. Yeah, so I was lucky for sure.
That's good. So, what are some of the things that you did for yourself that you now recommend to your patients, like diet changes?
Mm. I would say, like, it's interesting because a lot of the patients I see are very different. I'm a lean PCOS patient, so what I would do for myself versus someone who is overweight would be totally different. But generally speaking, like, I would say the biggest thing for me has been dietary changes, which has been like going dairy and gluten free, and honestly taking out every piece of sugar in my diet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even to the point where this year I actually started taking out like honey and maple syrup and
Yeah.
all these things that still end up turning into glucose in your body. And so ever since that too, I've noticed my skin is way more clear by even just doing that. So, we always talk about paleo diet, and paleo does have still maple syrup and honey and all those good things. But yeah, those things can even impact you as well. So,
Yeah, sugar is such a big thing too. Like in addition to gluten and dairy, when you like look at how much sugar we just have in a day,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't consider like, oh, like maple syrup or maybe like something that's
Bread
basic,
has sugar.
bread, and then like once you like take that out, like you said, like it gets rid of a lot of the inflammatory symptoms like acne or other issues.
yeah, and that's why like even all of the studies are saying low carbohydrate diet, because all these carbohydrates we're putting into the body, they get broken down into small molecules of glucose, and glucose is basically sugar, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we really need to make sure. So yeah, I would say basically going on a dairy and gluten-free diet, taking out a bunch of sugar, and then using supplements. For me, it's very much using botanicals has really helped, because I have low estrogen levels, and so estrogen and like high testosterone. So like things like saw palmetto can really help me, but also like build herbs that help to build estrogen, like tribulus and black cohosh. All of those herbs kind of like in synergy together can really help support my body. And then stress management is huge. Like I had a point where I didn't get a period for like 4 months when I was writing board exams.
Oh yeah.
And that makes sense, right? Because I was
Yeah,
like
totally.
super stressed. Yeah. And I find that too with my patients when they come to me, they're quite stressed. And so one of the things we're doing is really focusing on how to build like mindfulness into your day and
Mm.
using yoga. as one of the biggest things to help you. Actually, someone sent me a study today, and it was yoga 3 times a week can reduce your testosterone by 29%.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it was mindfulness yoga.
Yeah, relaxing.
Yeah, so those things are huge, right? Like building all of the foundations of health, I think, are the biggest things. And it takes time. Like it took me time too to really build those in. But once I
Yeah.
did, I saw huge changes.
That's such a good way to put it, building those in.
The mindful thing. Would you consider meditation as a mindful like a thing to do?
Oh yeah. Like I would say foundations of health are like diet, um, exercise, sleep, and stress,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you really build the foundations around all four of those things, and then on top of that, add supplements or add botanicals if you need it, because those are the things that are lifelong that are going to help the body regardless. And like stress management, like that one, really it's about becoming more mindful in terms of what's happening in your body, you know?
It's funny because people like to start with supplements.
Yeah, right away jump into supplements because
Yeah.
it's like the magical solution. But you have there's a reason it's called supplement. You have to supplement onto something you're doing at the same time.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true. And like today I had a patient who like we went over, Voxetal is really helping her. It's getting her to get a cycle every month, but she's still struggling with like stress and sleep and she's still struggling with all these things. And it's like, it's okay to take a Voxetal to get your cycles regular again, but at the end of the day, you still need to work on those foundations, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
say the same thing. Like, even if you're taking Ovasitol, you can reverse your symptoms by also improving your diet, your lifestyle, going gluten and dairy free. Instead, like, if you don't do that, then you kind of stand still. Like, you take Ovasitol, but you don't really see the progress with your health in reversing symptoms.
One of the biggest ways to like reduce insulin resistance and start getting your cells to become more sensitive to insulin from what we see is actually diet. It actually surpasses something like metformin and even ovasitol and myoinositol because the diet is actually where like that's the first point of contact, in your digestive system and then into your bloodstream. Like all those nutrients that you're putting in, that's gonna what's really gonna change those numbers on blood work.
Wow, that's amazing. So, can you touch on diet a little more and like tell us about some of the research behind gluten and dairy free that you share with your patients and how you help them adapt their diet?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so diet is huge. The first thing we go over is like a kind of a complete diet diary to see like what they're eating, and then really explain to them that like basically what we see in terms of dairy is that dairy can be extremely low on glycemic index. So even if you look at like milk, for example, milk is very low on glycemic index. So when I say glycemic index, I'm talking about how high glucose rises after eating a certain food. But when you look at the insulin index, it's actually extremely high. It's like almost double or like 3 times higher on the insulin index. And that's huge because, when we're talking about reducing insulin to like help with weight loss and help with insulin resistance, we really want to make sure that we're putting in foods that actually are low on insulin index. And that's something I feel like we don't necessarily talk about
Mm-hmm.
in terms of diabetes and PCOS. And so that's one thing I'm trying to explain to them and showing them the graphs of like, this is what it looks like. And so they understand for sure. And then, there is some research that we have. And one of the studies actually here, I have it here. It was with like 400 women in Iran, and it was found that there was actually a direct relationship between milk consumption and the risk of having PCOS, which is crazy, right? Because
Wow.
that's huge. First of all, it's a lot of women. So 400 women is a pretty good study. And the relationship that they found was huge. And then even like studies with like low starch and low dairy consumption in like overweight women that have PCOS, like they saw a reduction in weight loss and fasting insulin and testosterone and insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And that's huge, right? So there's studies that are there and we see the impact. as we're putting patients on a dairy-free diet, it's definitely difficult. A lot of patients, there's different types of patients. Like some patients, I'll ask them, like, are you an all or nothing person? or are you that person who needs to like slowly take it out because they've lived with dairy for like maybe 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of really like supporting them on saying, okay, like if you eat dairy every day, then maybe decrease it to like every other day. Or if you eat dairy like maybe 2 to 3 times a week, then like cut it down to half or like cut it all out altogether. So it really depends on where the patient's at to like help to support them to reduce the dairy. But they know that like even sometimes just convincing someone, hey, go dairy free for the weekend or like 3 days, they see a huge difference
Yeah.
in their like swelling or like pain and even
Acne.
like their bloating and like gas, like all these digestive symptoms improve. So then that gives them motivation. And then they come back and they're like, I'm telling everyone to go dairy free. My
Yeah.
partner's now dairy free. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah. So they get motivated, but there's some of them are really resistant, right? Because they've like lived with like chai tea that has like milk in there like every day
As a kid,
of
you
their
grow
life.
up drinking milk every
Milk,
night.
cups and cups of milk
It's like
every
built
night.
into our brain.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I remember when I was younger, my mom used to tell me, "Hey, just drink a cup of milk and it'll help you go to sleep."
Yeah, yeah, that was the thing.
And
I
I remember
hated
doing
milk.
that when I had trouble sleeping, and now I'm like,
Oh,
I can't believe I did that. But I mean, it helped at the time, but yeah, now I'm like, I will not, I cannot drink milk at all. Like it just, even like when I
that
go to
would be like
Starbucks to like
death.
have
A
something like
cup of
that.
milk for us? Death.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I said a cup of milk for us would be like death.
It
Can
would
you
be the death.
imagine?
Yeah. Sometimes when I go and instead of putting coconut milk, they put regular milk, I like die. I'm like, oh my gosh, this tastes
Oh, no.
horrible. It actually tastes so much better with coconut.
Yeah,
And
you
so
can
Yeah.
see
yeah,
it.
it's huge. It's just about your body getting used to it. And once they see the change and the impact, they're sold.
Yeah, one thing you said that was interesting was the insulin index. I haven't personally heard that before. Is there like some other foods that we should be aware of that is like high on the insulin index that maybe like sisters should avoid?
You know, foods that are high on insulin index would be like similar to like glycemic index, but the ones that are specifically like low on glycemic but high on insulin, those are like dairy products.
Oh, I
Mm.
see.
But yeah, even if you Google insulin index, like you can get a list of like all the foods that are like high,
Perfect.
like low, medium, high on insulin index, which is really
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, and that's one index that we really need to pay attention to, especially because the goal is to bring insulin down so that the body has a chance to use fat stores for energy instead of glycogen in the liver and whatnot. So it's really important to have these big meals but then also don't eat in between, or like intermittent fasting as well, especially if you have a high insulin, because that gives insulin a chance to actually calm down.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked like in the previous episode that like 12 hours it may be like the perfect range for a woman with PCOS, just so like it gives enough time for insulin to come down, but not too much where then your blood sugar drops and you have the opposite effect.
Yeah, for sure. I always say 12 hours too, because I think 16 is a little bit too much. And I mean, I think 16 is okay if you're not doing it every day, and your insulin's really high,
Yeah.
like maybe
Once
like
or
twice a
twice a
week,
week. Yeah.
but not every day. And 12 is more manageable because you're basically asleep and then 2 hours, before and after
Mm-hmm.
waking up and going to bed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Do you feel like everyone with PCOS should be gluten and dairy free, or at least dairy free?
I think definitely dairy free. Every single patient who comes in who has PCOS asks this, and I always say like definitely dairy free because dairy can really impact that insulin, and we know insulin is a huge driving factor
Mm-hmm.
into many of the symptoms related to PCOS. Um, because insulin drives testosterone production, and that's where like all the symptoms happen, like acne, hair loss, hair growth, um, weight gain. But basically, yeah, dairy free for sure. And then, the meal plans that and the way we kind of coach patients is that they should be gluten free as well. Only because like it really is an inflammatory food, and most patients actually find that they have like a little bit of a sensitivity to it. Because PCOS has this low underlying, like low grade inflammation. If we remove inflammatory foods, they're just going to get better inevitably, right? So, like most people can appreciate that and come off of it, no problem. Some people obviously they feel like they don't have any digestive upset or issues with gluten, and if that's you, like I think it's fine to keep in a little bit, but I still think like going majority like gluten free would be your best bet, because at the end of the day, like the foods that are filled with gluten are more processed, right? Unless you're buying like a really nice piece of like sourdough bread or something like that. And then like if you don't have a sensitivity to gluten, then maybe on occasion having it.
Yeah. I mean, some of you are hard to digest, so it's like it does havoc on your intestines. Like any corn-based products that are like cheaply made, just so bad for our digestive
Yeah.
system.
Yeah,
Sourdough bread has minimal gluten though.
Yeah, that's what
sourdough
Yeah.
has
she was mentioning. It's really good.
minimal gluten. I'm really sensitive, I feel like, to gluten, and even sourdough bread will impact me.
Hmm.
Yeah. For me,
So,
my
I really
skin.
think the gluten part is maybe a little bit more case by case, but like there's no harm going gluten free, because then you're just forced to eat a real food diet, like you're forced to eat like good healthy fats, lots of veggies, good lean protein, and then, carbohydrates that aren't processed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in many cases you don't have to maybe strictly go 100% gluten free. It's maybe replacing a lot of those like really big staples like bread, for example, that's has so much gluten, so much, empty calories sometimes because it's made, white bread has like no nutrients basically. So like if you replace a lot of those basic fundamentals, maybe like 40-50%, then like it's really helpful, I think.
Yeah. And I always say that, like, if you're going to have a carbohydrate, you have to have some kind of protein and healthy fat beside it, right? Because that's going to stabilize blood sugar. And that's the goal, right? We don't want these like spikes and lows of blood sugar throughout the day, because that will impact your insulin as well, your insulin and glucose in terms of balancing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally. So, what are some of the supplements that you recommend? Moving on from diet.
Yeah. So I think, it really depends on the patient again, but majority of the time, if it's insulin resistance, we're using things like myoinositol, D-chiroinositol. We're using berberine. This is a herb, like a Chinese medicine herb, that's really focused on the gut, and can help. We've actually seen in some studies helps with like metabolic syndrome and non-alcohol fatty liver disease, helps with cholesterol. It really works in the gut and helps support the microbiome in the gut, or like even killing anything that's there, like a virus or bacteria, anything like that. But what we found actually in the studies, that it actually can lower insulin. And so that's one herb that I use. If someone's like really insulin resistant, their numbers are extremely high. They don't have like too many digestive issues, because sometimes berberine can be more irritating to the gut. We tend to go towards like berberine, and to really drive the numbers down and help stabilize insulin and glucose. So yeah, that's a herb that I really like. And then chromium as well, right? Um, Chromium's really good as well at really like even just maintaining blood glucose, and also just supporting like healthy weight and even cholesterol. So yeah, chromium and just like products that have like multiple different types of things in there to help with insulin resistance. Um, like alpha lipoic acid and N-acetylcysteine, all these like supplements we've seen that can help with insulin resistance.
Quercetin is one I've heard a lot about.
Yeah, and I love N-acetylcysteine. So N-acetylcysteine is a precursor to glutathione, and glutathione is our biggest antioxidant, one of the biggest antioxidants in our body. And N-acetylcysteine can really help that patient who has like lots of inflammation, who it actually has been shown too to help reduce testosterone and insulin. So it kind of like hits a bunch of things. It's even helpful to like help with ovulation, like regulating ovulation. So yeah, I really love N-acetylcysteine because oftentimes we see a lot of inflammation in PCOS, especially when we do lab work. We see that their HSCRP, this is high sensitivity C-reactive protein, this is high. So yeah, so I
Mine was
love
so
that.
high. Mine was like 10 times higher than it should be.
Is it?
It used to be.
It used to be, yeah. And it's so surprising, right? Because sometimes people don't have any signs of inflammation. It's not like you have pain or like,
Yeah.
like people won't even have that, but then their HSCRP will be extremely high. So, like inside there's somewhere there's inflammation, maybe the gut, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. Did you
There
have any
was one,
symptoms?
speaking of CRP, I remember when I found that out on my lab work, I showed it to someone, I think she was a dietitian, and she was like, well, it could be that you were sick, like a cold or something that caused this influence. I was like, but I don't have a cold. Like I have PCOS. She's like, well, like maybe this is just how your body is. And this is like the weight that your body wants to be. And I'm like, but I'm so uncomfortable. I'm like exploding out of my skin. I feel like this is a terrible feeling of inflammation, And she's like, but like maybe that's just how you are. I'm like, but it needs to change. Like, what do you
Something
mean?
needs to change, yeah.
So
So it's
funny.
interesting because PCOS is a syndrome, there's so many moving parts to it, right?
Yeah.
And so like sometimes some people just don't know all the little connections because there's so
Yeah.
many little things and everybody's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
Like my HSCRP has never been elevated, but my LH and FSH are pretty low, but my estrogen's also low and my testosterone's high. So it's like, it's so interesting because like every single patient comes in is like a unique puzzle that we just kind of have to fit back
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, and it changes over time. Like
Yeah.
I had a Dutch test done, the complete hormone test done 3 years ago, and it said I had low testosterone and high estrogen, like estrogen dominance, and that was so different from like way before. And I think it was like stress related. We were like wedding planning, getting our everything was changing. So then I knew exactly what supplements to take and like how to handle the situation. And now I'm curious to see like what's going on now. Maybe I'll take another hormone test.
Yeah, because all the lab testing we do, it's like a snapshot of like what's
Yeah.
happening in your body right now, right? And you're
Yeah.
right, it can change. Stressful situations can really throw things off, especially with insulin resistance.
Yeah. Somebody last night messaged me and was like, how does Beyonce do it? Like, how does she keep up? She's like, I'm watching the Coachella performance and it's just so insane. How
She's
does
on
she not
like
have adrenal fatigue?
she has everything going, like all the supplements, all the right food. If
Yeah.
you do everything, I mean, it can be
I
done.
feel like, if you combat the
Maybe add some
stress.
drugs in there. Who knows?
No, I feel like she probably has like a chef, a maid, a
Yeah.
nanny, like
Yeah.
everyone, pampering her so that she's not like overly stimulated when she's doing this
Yeah,
like crazy routine. Plus, there's genetics. Like, not everybody has
for
PCOS.
sure.
Not
Not
everyone's
everybody
like
has Beyonce's
predisposed.
genetics, unfortunately.
Yeah, not everyone has Beyonce's genetics.
But also, like, yeah, her full-time job is to focus on her body.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And honestly, we should make our not full-time job because we have to work, but like our full-time hobby
Or part-time
focusing
jobs, yeah.
Self care. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
focusing
a
on our health.
huge, like, you won't be able to show up for your family, your
Yeah,
friends, your coworkers, anybody, unless you yourself are putting the effort to become healthier in your own body.
right.
And just like listening to like what your body needs, right? Just being more aware about it, because even like with foods, the more aware we become on like how foods affect us can make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be like with the patients every 24/7 like asking them like what's your digestion like after you ate that thing, right? Like it's really just like setting them up for how can they be more empowered to make the right choices and decisions, and then have that control for the rest of their lives to be like, okay, actually I think I need to start taking this, or start exercising, or start getting back on track, like, like just putting the foundations back in.
A lot of times it's just like them seeing the results themselves as like an eyewitness. That's like so powerful to like sustain that
Stick to it.
permanently. Like for me, like when I was like 18, I totally like dropped drinking like stuff like Coca-Cola, things like that. I learned about sugar and stuff, and like it was hard at first, but like once you feel better and like you like don't even want it, like you're like disgusted by like I can never have a Coke ever
I
again.
can't even imagine taking
Yeah.
a sip at this point in my
Ever.
life.
I haven't done it like in like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't even want it.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a fashionable thing at one point, like the 90s and stuff. Everyone was drinking Coke. So, yeah. And then once you get into that, it's like hard to realize what it's affecting. Even gluten and dairy, like you're eating it. You have no idea how it's going to affect you unless you cut it out for like a month to see.
Yeah, I always think of it as like a flame. It's like we're feeding the flame, and the flame is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we just have this big flame in our body. And then eventually, like, we put water over the flame and it just becomes ashes. And then, like, we're just in this, like, state of, like, rebuild. And then anytime you, like, add a little bit of, like, gluten, or you add a little bit of dairy, you, like, feed the flame again. And it just, like, comes back. And it's just, yeah. And you want to really keep it at that low level, like, nothing's happening and everything's just running smoothly, because that will actually help you change things and move forward, feel more energy, sleep better, get your digestive system on track. Yeah.
Totally.
The other thing about gluten actually is that it can cause leaky gut, right? And leaky gut is huge, especially in digestive cases. And because what gluten does is it actually breaks the bonds that hold the small intestinal cells together. These are called tight junctions. And so what will happen is, like, the gluten will come in and it'll just like break all the bonds that hold the cells together. So now you have this opening up of cells in the small intestine. So now all the molecules can like kind of get through that are from your food. And that can really impact the immune system, cause inflammation. And so it's, some people have that too. And it's important to like think about all these things, because gluten can affect so many different things in the digestive system, right? So things on how the digestive system works.
Yeah. And it can also affect insulin levels as well. Inflammation.
Yeah, I mean, there's even research showing that it can lead to joint pain and like back pain and stuff like that, because that's again inflammation being caused.
Yeah, for sure.
Very interesting. I mean, there's just so much research on gluten and dairy, but unfortunately, they haven't done specific research on gluten, dairy, and PCOS. And I feel like that's why in school, they don't teach dietitians the specifics of this, because there's not enough research. You have to have experience. You have to have PCOS. You have to see all these patients with PCOS for a while so you can understand the trends that are happening. And, there are a couple of books out there, not even a lot, like literally 2, that really capture the PCOS picture of what's going on out there. And aside from that, which is like, a couple of doctors who wrote books, anecdotal evidence of like what they've been seeing with their patients. Aside from that, there's no research specifically on PCOS, gluten, dairy, the different types of PCOS, what affects and stuff like that. So a lot of doctors and dietitians don't know what the heck is happening. And it's really annoying. I just really wish people would get on the bandwagon.
I know. I know. So many people would benefit from that. But that's why we're here, to spread the word, right?
Yeah.
And really educate women on what their body needs.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's also like these days it's very hard to follow research studies and like follow at least reputable ones, because like so many are one-sided, because it's just trying to figure one thing out. So I feel like going through a doctor's experience and their own anecdotal evidence based on their patients is a lot of times more valuable than what you can find
Totally. By the time a research study is conducted and approved and launched,
Yeah.
and then the curriculum at your school changes and they teach it to the dietitians, 10 years will go by. And
Yeah.
like, I don't see that happening
Yeah, it's
anytime
so
soon.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
had to learn all of this through experience and naturopathic doctors who have experience,
Yeah.
for heaven's sakes.
Okay.
Okay, should we go over some of the messages that we've received on Instagram story? I asked the sisters what they would ask a naturopathic doctor, if they had a chance. And let me go over a few. So, one of them from Tara Radcliffe is, how did I get PCOS in the first place? And how do I resolve the underlying issues that caused it?
Hmm. That's a huge question.
I know.
But I think, one of the biggest things is genetics. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I would say is
Environment.
epigenetics, right? Like the environment that you live in can really impact and turn on certain genes in your body that can then create a hormonal imbalance. So basically, even like stressful situations or stressful times in your life can really change the hormonal picture in your body, or like start weight gain or start insulin resistance. A lot of times that's where, when patients are coming in, they're saying like, I like went to university and then like all of a sudden I had all this stress, and then like I started getting irregular cycles, and then and then I started growing hair in weird places, and now I have hair loss. And so like,
Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like it's very much like genetics, but then also epigenetics. So like the environment that you're putting your body in, the stress or whatnot, to really
Yeah.
impact it.
Being given birth
Totally.
control, something like
Oh,
that.
yeah. After birth control, you can have PCOS, post pill PCOS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And
There's all these,
so, it can really impact you. And so I think the second part of the question was like, how do you treat the underlying cause? Was that the second part?
yes. How do you treat the underlying cause?
So I think honestly the biggest thing in my practice, and I think you would agree, like using lab work actually to really understand the underlying cause of what's happening in your body is probably number one. Because there can be multiple different things going on, and not, like I said, everyone's the same. Some people will have certain hormones high or certain hormones low, and it's really about figuring out what's actually happening and then treating that specific issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of supplementation, lab work is so helpful because you have to know what's going on before just throwing supplements at it. So that's why we don't really recommend like all these supplements all the time. We explain them, and then if a sister feels like it's appropriate, they'll take it. But most sisters have insulin resistance, so Ovasitol helps most sisters. So that's one.
But yeah,
Vascular's great for egg quality too.
yeah.
So, you might not have insulin resistance, or you might have like a little bit of insulin resistance, but if you're trying to conceive, like it's still really good for egg quality.
Totally. Okay, one more question. Christine A says, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? I don't feel a lot of a difference day to day.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I honestly feel like sometimes it can be hard if you know you're doing the right thing. But what I can say to that is, it's really important to like, again, go into your body and like feel like what's actually happening. Are you getting more energy? Are you less stressed? Are you losing weight, or even not even numbers, but do you feel like your body composition is changing? Um, and even like give it time. Hormones take time to change. Like even give it at least 3 months, to
Yeah.
really like, after like give it all your best for 3 months to change your diet and really, if you're going to put supplements in, put the supplements in, but then use those 3 months to really like focus on how you're feeling, and make sure you exercise too during that time, because those things will actually impact you even further. But yeah, I feel like, if you don't feel change right away, it's not an issue. I would say keep at it, wait for 3 months, and maybe then see if you need to adjust or change something.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Love
Great.
that. Another question. How do I keep my hormones under control when I go off birth control? Will I gain weight again?
Will I gain weight again? Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's
Oh,
different.
yeah. How to keep your hormones controlled after the birth control. Okay. So essentially, like the birth control, I would say needs at least like 3 months after that to really like then look at your hormones, because within that 3 months your cycles could be totally regular because you just came off the birth control. But again, give it 3 months, and then at that point go and get some lab work, because then you'll know exactly what's happening in your body naturally. And then at that point you can kind of figure out what's going on in terms of a hormonal imbalance, and then treat it based on that.
Yes.
Right?
Babe, are there any questions you see here that you want to ask?
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I like this one. Because I've heard this before, how is sleep apnea related to PCOS? Have you heard of any relation between sleep apnea and PCOS?
We see a lot of sleep apnea in PCOS
I've heard that too.
patients. Yeah. And I think the connection there is the insulin and the glucose.
Okay.
Lowering that.
Yeah. Really focusing on the insulin resistance.
We have been recommending CBD lately because it's really helped with stress, especially during coronavirus and all of this. But one sister, actually, she took CBD. She was getting more REM sleep, like 2 hours more REM sleep. It was
Yeah.
incredible.
She had like that tracker app, and then like she like showed a screenshot before and after, and it was like 45 minutes compared to 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's huge.
Yeah. But yeah, I think all the questions were like about everything we pretty much talked about and stuff.
I feel like we covered them.
Yeah, we covered everything.
Awesome.
Great. I love this podcast episode,
I know.
honestly.
People are going to really enjoy this.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, do you want to share with us a win from one of your patients?
Oh, yeah.
I know we're
that'd be
like
great.
putting you on the spot, but can you think of a scenario with a patient that just like turned out great? And
Yes. Okay, let me think of one I had.
Yeah, and then maybe afterwards you can let the sisters know how they can reach you if they ever want your help or
Yes.
anything like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So let me see here, because I actually pulled out 3 kind of cases that I was thinking about. It's so hard to choose. Everyone's so good at doing what I tell them to do.
I know. We always feel the same way. We have like so many great success stories and stuff. We want to tell them all, but only one per week.
Okay, only one. So basically, okay, I'll tell this one. Hold on. So she was like overweight PCOS patient. She had gone Synthroid. She's trying to get pregnant. And Synthroid is a thyroid medication. And so basically, like in March or January of 2018, like kind of in between there, she had like her HbA1c, this is like how well you're able to process glucose over 3 months, was like 6.7. And then her fasting glucose was 6.2, so it was above the range. And then her fasting insulin actually, so she just fasted for 12 hours, she went in, she got a blood test, was 431, which is huge because you kind of want this to be around 50 in healthy cells.
Oh my gosh.
And so, you know, we changed her diet. We put in things like low carb diet, lots of veggies, lean protein, gluten and dairy free. She went on inositol. She did vitamin D. She went on berberine. She took B12. She did prenatal, and she also did like coenzyme Q10. So like quite a few supplements, but there was a lot to change, and she really wanted to get pregnant, right? And so sometimes you have to use these supplements to really help to support the body. But then basically in July of 2018, her HbA1c was now 5.6, so she's in the healthy range. Her fasting glucose, same thing, 5.6, and then her fasting insulin was 180. So still high, but a huge change from like 431, right? When we first started working together. Which was huge. And she actually ended up doing an IUI, and we did acupuncture like almost weekly, and she ended up getting pregnant in July.
Oh my gosh, how exciting.
Congrats to her.
Yeah, and like, you know, she was that patient who like they couldn't start medication if her HbA1c was above this range, and she was tracking like her blood glucose even like after breakfast and lunch and dinner to like really get her blood sugar down.
Oh yeah.
And really focusing on that diet piece, and that's what really drove the numbers down. I would say, like, I think the supplements helped her, but that was a huge thing. Like even just like small things she would notice that like didn't necessarily seem like they were bad for her body, but were spiking her blood sugar, right? Like she would do like chia seed pudding, for example, and like if she put like unsweetened almond milk or like accidentally put like sweetened almond milk, she would like see a huge spike, right?
Wow.
Like so she really got to like understand like food and like how to read labels, and I think that's huge because those are the things that will actually help you. And if you're really insulin resistant, using like a glucometer is actually really good because it can show you and teach you how your body is reacting to all these foods that you're eating.
It's a great idea. Is that something you can find like buy on Amazon or anything? Glucometer?
Yeah, so I think the one that I like is called Freestyle Libre. Okay. I have no association with them, but like that one's pretty cool because like you just stick like it's just like a sensor, and then you can just like tap the machine to it, and it, or like the sensor to it, and it just tells you your blood sugar, and then you can even check it on your like an app on your phone, which is cool. Yeah.
It's not a needle?
Say again.
Is it a needle or a sensor?
I think it's like a tiny needle that just goes into your arm. Yeah,
that's really good. It's very powerful, like you said, for people to witness the results and see what's happening like right after they eat something.
Yeah, because they think like, oh, it's okay if I just eat this, but then they realize that actually is impacting their body, right? And then they see that when they put good healthy carbs with like protein and fat and lots of veggies, they see their blood sugar low, so they're like more motivated, more convinced that like, yeah, this is actually what my body is telling me that I need to do.
For sure.
Instead of someone like me just being like, this is what your body needs.
Listen to me.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And if anybody wanted to find you, how could they reach you so you could help them, so that you could help them out?
Awesome. Yeah. So I have a website. It's just saminamitha.com. And then I'm on Instagram as well. And I'm doing a webinar on Tuesday, next Tuesday. So I don't know when it's going to go live, but basically, check my website for any like webinars or Instagram because, I'm always trying to just put information out there because that's what I feel people need, right?
Yeah.
They just need more guidance and more information and more support. And they just need to know, like the sisterhood, like you have, like to really just get support on what they need to do.
Yeah, you're one of our favorite like other PCOS accounts and just in general like health accounts because you really know how to put the information out there and like make it easy for others to learn from. So we love having you here on the podcast today. Honestly, it was a great interview and we should definitely do this more often.
Yeah,
I agree. I love chatting with you guys. I love this. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you, sisters, for listening to this episode. This is, I guess, it for this one.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you by Pure Spectrum CBD. Sirak and I have been taking CBD and we are loving it.
I'm holding the tincture right now. Tallene, can you open your mouth, please?
Now?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a dosage. Now, keep it there for 60 seconds. While she does that, let me tell you the great benefits of CBD for PCOS. Studies show it reduces cortisol, improves insulin sensitivity, reduces inflammation. You can go to purespectrumcbd.com now to order and use the code THESISTERHOOD, one word, at checkout for 20% off. Now, Tallene, hold it for 30 seconds longer while the sisters enjoy the show.